Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm Ed Helinski. Glad you could join us here today. Another great guest here, longtime NT assistant coach, two-time NT head coach, been with the program for many, many years, recently retired, the one and the only Rick Tomm. Rick Tomm, good to see you, my friend. How's things?
Oh, it's great, Ed. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure, and your work is just awesome. Your recent interview with Ed Harmon, I was just mesmerized by it, and seeing some of my former players doing so well, it just makes me really happy and grateful for such a great career. Um, and I thank you for doing this. It's a lot of time tracking people down. We appreciate this.
Thank you for the kind words. Let's get right into it. You're a Batavia guy. You're not an NT guy. You're not a Western New York guy. You're kind of a Western New York guy, but more of a 585 or area than you are the 716. Give us a little bit about your background growing up.
Well, as most of my lumberjacks know, I'm from Big B. That's Batavia, and my parents are from City of Tonawanda. And I'm not sure if you know that. And teaching jobs were tough to find in the '60s. So my father landed in a place called Alexander, New York, um, and we survived. We lived in Attica. We survived the prison riot in 1971, and then they moved us to the big city of Batavia. So that's where I grew up. My father was a head football coach at Alexander, a small school, who's having quite a lot of success right now. But at that time, he coached their first undefeated season in 1965. And lo and behold, his cousin was Diane Ramsey, who married the great Chuck Ramsey. So Chuck Ramsey was instrumental in teaching my father everything about football. Um, and he had me, on the sidelines. He coached at Batavia High School, which has a great tradition of football in that little city. I was a ball boy, just loving the game. Ended up going to Notre Dame High School. So on Friday nights, the public school would play, and then on Saturday nights, our school would play in Batavia. And it was quite a great time to grow up. And Section 5 football was really exciting at that time, as it still is.
How were you as a
Now,
football player?
I thought I was a basketball player, Ed, and I was okay. I mean, I played quarterback. It was a small school. I was okay, I would say. Real problem is I threw the ball left-handed, and I threw a baseball right-handed. So I was more, just a rollout guy, and um, I had the football knowledge from being around the game for a long time. And I don't know if you ever heard of Caledonia Mumford.
Yes. Yeah, mom. Yep.
Caledonia Mumford had a 49 game winning streak when I was a freshman in high school. And I don't think they wanted me to quit football. They didn't have a backup. So I was part of that team that Notre Dame High School beat them 16-0 to end their winning streak at 49 games. And the general manager, what's interesting as history plays out, the general manager of the Chicago Bears, have you heard of this guy? His last
Or,
name is Poles. I,
okay.
I believe I believe it's Brian Poles, but his father and uncle were on that team. There was a famous football family from Caledonia, so I kind of like the Bears now because he's like from the Genesee region. So we got to represent.
So how did a guy like you end up in North Tonawanda?
Wow. How did that happen? I started teaching in Oakfield, Alabama. And at that time, I knew the kind of the pitfalls of teaching. You weren't going to be driving a Mercedes Benz and things of that nature. And when I first started teaching, I coached both sports. Anything the school asked me to do, I would do it. And I got behind on my master's degree. Not behind, but you had 5 years to get your master's degree. And I said, well, this is a good opportunity to go see if I like something else. And I had an opportunity in New York City to work for a bank. So I worked on Wall Street while getting my master's degree at St. John's University. And I had enough of New York City. It was great for a couple years. And then it was time to like, okay, Western New York is where I want to have my family and grow. And I want to teach, I want to coach, and things of that nature. So I got hired at North Tonawanda in March of 1994, which March is an odd time to get hired. I finished up my graduate work in January, went to Hawaii with my mom. My sister was out there at the time, and I landed in NT. And man, did that work out great. At that time, our principal was Frank Ruggiero. I don't know if you know that name.
The last name is very, very synonymous with North Tonawanda and the Tonawandas.
Okay, and you know what? I don't know where Frank grew up, but he went to Syracuse University and he was on the football team.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy that was interested in coaching, and several of us got hired by him in the mid '90s. And the rest is history, as you would say. My first passion, I thought I was going to be some basketball coach. And once children started coming around and family, the football season was a lot shorter with the basketball runs all winter long and summer camps. And of course, as football evolved, we got busy with that. But it was my personality was more conducive maybe to football than it was basketball.
You started up in the ranks, I'd be what, freshman and then JV, and talk about that experience.
Tremendous experience, actually modified, Ed. And I give a lot of credit to the whole program, to Dave Anastasi and Dave Vona, and Franny Burke. Those guys were really set the bar on how to be a professional, not only on the field, but in the classroom, and how to conduct yourself. And, we started modified coaches, and we felt lucky to be able to coach. Corey Zayats and I had the first modified team, right in 1994, and our numbers were terrible. And we rebuilt that to the next year. We had like 80 guys show up, and John Chisera was our athletic director, another great person. And he's like, "What are we going to do? We can't equip 80 guys." And what was a good problem to have. And so Coach Anastasi, he had no idea who I was, and he knew I was a teacher in the building, and he took a shot at me, gave me a chance to coach, which I just love being around the kids. And I just coached freshmen, foot modified, then the freshmen, and then the JV. But all the time I was more basketball oriented until Coach Jantzi took over.
And then you got onto Jantzi's staff, and
yeah.
And talk about moving up to varsity and the responsibilities that you have as an assistant coach on the varsity level.
Yeah, I think Ed, I think the responsibility starts at the lowest level, to be honest with you, and it's instilled in you from the top. So I briefly talked about Coach Anastasi, but he would go to every clinic there was in Western New York. And then he would bring us along and take us to national clinics. I remember go to Syracuse and not only learn football, but show us how to have fun and how to come together as a staff and really trust each other. Because, with the kids, you want one front. And so if we had the same message from modified, freshman, JV to varsity, you were going to be successful. So Coach Anastasi really showed us the togetherness of the whole program. So when Coach Jantzi came along, and I give Erik a lot of credit, like I said, I was essentially my knowledge base was basketball mostly. My high school football coach was old school, as a lot of my players will let you know, or they talked about some of our shenanigans, but that's all we knew. Like that was football. You just you don't get it done, you're doing up downs. You don't get it done, it's tackling drills until you get it right, or hit the sled. And there was a lot of barking and grinding. And Erik, as you well know, is quiet. His demeanor is so cool and casual. He knew that he had to get guys around him that were a little bit more, I don't know, what's a nice word there, Ed?
Animated?
There you go. Nice. Animated. And Erik was brilliant. I mean, he got Craig Krasansky, who I coached with at Oakfield, current coach at Canisius High School. Erik's now back with him at Canisius High School. I don't know if you know that. But Brad Deach, Dan DeAngelis, he got from Canada. He just wanted to volunteer with us. And Erik brought us all together, and he knew what his strengths were, and he knew what he needed on his staff. So I think the biggest difference between the youngest ranks, the younger, modified JV, is the expectation outside of practice and your commitment to the film and the preparation and those things. That's where that's the biggest difference. But also the stakes are higher because our freshman teams were always terrific, but they never really put those scores in the newspaper. So when the games are in the newspaper, things get a little bit more intense.
A lot of former players give you a lot of credit for you went along with them as they matured and they moved up. Get a lot of accolades and a lot of praise for the work that you did with these kids. What made you so good?
The kids made me so good. And that's really nice. I don't know. I just when I first was a teacher, I wasn't myself. So like my first year, you wanted to be like my. I think I give a lot of credit to my high school coaches. So I already talked about the football coach, Bill Sutherland, old school, spit through his teeth. He was just an awesome person, awesome guy, and everything's just that. And then our basketball coach, he's the winningest basketball coach in Section 5, and completely opposite. Let the kids play and had fun. You knew where you stood, very competitive people. And so at first, I wasn't myself. And I think the biggest thing is, and kids can see right through it, is you just got to be yourself. And have I screwed up over the years where you're just like, and the kids know that you're human, and you go back and correct it. And I think the biggest thing is they knew I loved what I did. And, we all did. We had great passion for it. I think working that job down in New York was huge for me as a young man, because a lot of teachers go through it and they complain about things that aren't really important when you do the real work and grind and see what's out there. I always looked at it as a blessing to be able to coach and be with those guys. So my high school coach, I remember they used to tell us, like, our success is measured by what you become as men. And just walking around and seeing these young kids from the mid 90s, grown men on your and I don't even want to start naming guys. The guys that you've had, I've seen them as little kids basically, and they're just awesome people, awesome fathers, awesome teachers, awesome electricians, any line of work, lawyers, doctors. You had them all on your show, and it just makes me so proud. So I think the biggest thing is we just kept it real, to be honest with you, Ed. We just kept it real, told the kids the truth. If they were terrible, they knew they were terrible. If they were great, we'd hug them and tell them they were great too. So, and they knew we cared. I mean, and that's the biggest thing. And the connection to the program, to North Tonawanda, to the tradition. The tradition of North Tonawanda is awesome. It started with Coach Anastasi, my relationship with Chuck Ramsey. We never met Coach Vetter, of course, John Chisera. Those guys, they taught us what the tradition was, and we wanted to carry that with a badge of honor. John Monasani coached with us years ago. So those guys taught us the way. And I think we talked about this before. Did you know that Coach Jantzi and Coach Zayas went to Bucknell?
No. Which is the better connection.
Exactly.
Right.
So it was like it's like almost full circle. Coach Jantzi stayed at Vetter Hall at a dormitory, and he was like, "Who the heck is this guy?" Lo and behold, he lands at North Tonawanda years later, and it was just like a perfect storm. And what a great career! What great kids! This morning I was working out at the Lockport YMCA, and one of our former players, I'm so happy he said hello. He's a top accountant for M&T Bank, and former player of ours, and it's awesome. So that happens all the time, and it's a blessing.
How did you ramp up and maintain such a strong program under Jantzi for all those years and reloading with talent and recruiting talent and motivating talent and getting the best out of these guys?
Well, for one, we were young. when when you're young, you got a lot of energy, and you have more time. To be honest with you, but I think we came back. We later in our career we tried to do it, and it was just it didn't go as great as we wanted. Coach Bunker's working his tail off to try to turn that tradition back around. And I tell him, do not get discouraged. So we started in '94. We didn't win our first sectional title until 2001. And so that's 7 years of rebuilding and getting kids in the weight room and watching them play other sports, coaching them in other sports, getting maybe the 11th kid from the volleyball team out to play, getting the professional baseball player out to play, things of that nature. And I think kids just, they like the attention. So we played basketball with them. We were in the weight room all the time. You talk about the summer camps we had with them all the time. We checked on their grades. We checked with their teachers. And like I said, it was really a lucky thing. I was on the first wing of the high school. We had the phys ed department. Coach Zayats was on the second floor. Coach Cook was on the third floor. Coach Jantzi was in the science wing. The principals didn't have to do anything because the whole building was covered just by guys that cared. And so when you're invested that much into the school, it's just going to pay dividends. And then it becomes like, okay, we're not letting those guys down. And the seniors take over. Okay, no, this is how we do it. This is how you lift weights. This is how you show up on time. This is how we dress. Like Penn State, what do they wear for all these years? No names on the back, plain uniforms. And that's how the kids embraced it. They would leave their helmet on during their interviews. And we didn't really tell them to do that, but that was what they did. That was their pride from tradition, from the older kids teaching them the way.
You talked about grades. Were these kids student athletes first and foremost, or how were deficient grades handled?
Yeah, well, I used to have to tell the teachers, do you understand if this guy did not play football, what kind of character he would be in your classroom? Because sometimes they think, oh, you play football, so, he's going to be a great student. I think that what makes a school. Some kids need to be in the band. Some need to be in the chess club. Some need to play, need to swim, play football, just be involved. So my wife and I, with our children, just be involved. They don't have to be superstar, but just do something. And with football, if you think about the beautiful chemistry that we had very, tough kids, tough-minded kids, sometimes with tough family lives. And then you'd meld them with some beautiful family lives. And guess what happens? They learn and grow as people themselves. So some of the most troubled kids, I've heard some of the best stories about. And I'm proud of that. I mean, that's guys will come up to me and be like, Coach Tomm, remember I got in trouble? I go, no, I do not remember. You yelled at me so bad, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, whatever happened to that? He's doing great. And I think that's a big thing. I mean, we use football as a tool to get kids involved. And we were able to get some of our tougher kids that, a lot of times they just wouldn't be eligible to play academically. And we stayed on their report cards year round. Every 4 quarters, we had a scholar athlete team. And what that did, that even pushed our brighter guys. Like, to be at a public school and get a 93, you're awesome. Everybody loves you. You're a nice boy. But like, how about a 98, 99 if that's the best you can do? And that's kind of what we did. Just be the best person you can be. And, like I said, we just kept it real in that way. And just you love them. You just love the kids and everything they did. And that was a huge thing for us. Because if you're not, we feel in any football team, and you hear the pros, watch the pros. I mean, it's the smartest teams that win. The teams that are most disciplined, most intelligent, don't beat themselves. Those are the teams that are going to win. So that run you were talking about, did it start in the 2000s or did it start in the mid 90s? With some of those, some of those knuckleheads that you had to bring around. And And I think that's where it is, and it evolved to greatness, and it kind of carried on for some years there. We were blessed.
You talk about knuckleheads. You talk about discipline. How much was tough love used in maintaining control and on the teams?
To be honest with you, I think we had coach. You could look at Coach Jantzi had a point system, and I would say early on, Coach Deach came in. I've heard the kids talk about Burma Road. That's all Coach Deach. Like, you can't some of those tactics you can't do, but it kind of built a mindset. And like, we had practices. I remember Coach Jantzi was upset, and I was not the defense coordinator at that time. I think I was linebackers coach. Coach Deach, if he didn't like what was going on, he'd put the kids on the goal line, and we'd have a big game coming up, and he would forfeit his defensive time, put him on the goal line, and we just run. So I would say early on it was an issue. Coach Jantzi had a point system where if you didn't cut it, you didn't start in a game, you didn't play. And at first that was tough. You had some 500 seasons in there, but as years went on and kids understood, okay, they're going to be held accountable, that stuff kind of disappears. And so what's tough now, and just to talk about the difference, with our current team and the kids today, is when you don't have the numbers, it's easy as the coach to kind of, let me look the other way or something like that. But you can't. You got to hold them accountable from the beginning, and hopefully the leaders rise to the top. And I think that's a big thing that we've lost over time. We always try to instill leadership in the kids. And because if you had strong leaders, then the old school method of just run them until they, throw up and all that stuff, that's out the window. The kids just wanted to be great for each other, which is more powerful than anything.
How did the idea of going to the Indiana camps come about?
Oh, speaking of great people and great influences, the men in Indiana were terrific. Bob Bridge, Bob Copeland, Prescott. I'm just thinking of, and these were really cool guys. They were Indiana high school football coaches that were just buddies. And this is before the time of hitting during the summer and whatnot. So that was Dan DeAngelis. Have you heard his name before, Ed?
No.
Dan? Okay, his brother Sandro was Player of the Year at St. Joe's, but they came from Niagara Falls, Ontario, and Sandro kicked at Nebraska. He was a great running back, linebacker, but was a Division I kicker at Nebraska. And we were lucky enough that he just loved option football. So Dan DeAngelis played at Buff State. Brother went to St. Joe's. They weren't running option. Calls up Coach Jantzi. And again, to Coach Jantzi's credit, he did this often where he would pull in. He was never threatened by someone's intelligence or what they would do. And Dan DeAngelis was like option guru, old school, met these guys from Indiana at a clinic in Pennsylvania, and then the rest is history. But Dan was an awesome guy. He had that Canadian accent, so the kids would just have a blast with him. Wonderful, wonderful guy. But he would have them out in the parking lot running the midline on those straight lines in the parking spaces till all hours of the night after school. And he was just a technician of the option. And unfortunately for us, he became a Niagara Falls police officer, Ontario. And then the border, believe it or not, gave him a hard time, even though he was volunteering down here. And so that kind of became a problem for us. So he coached with us probably 2 or 3 years, but really got it going. And basically, he taught a lot of us coaches what the heck is going on. Jantz was writing a book at that time, but Danny got us out to Indiana, and that was something else. The Indiana guys at first didn't know what to make of us. Like I said, we were young, and we were like full of energy. And we weren't supposed to be working the camp, and we'd be coaching up our players. And then the guys would be like, what are these New Yorkers doing? That's good old Midwest hospitality. And we're just like, and so at first they were a little taken aback. And then we became great friends with them. And the kids the same way. that was kind of a cool thing for our kids because we'd come from New York, and and that was the same thing. Like, oh, we're the team from New York, so they wanted to kick our butt, and we wanted to represent, and it was something else. Like there would be some major hitting going on, and some of my best memories of that, we'd have the Civil War, where we would take the younger players, and then Coach Jantzi, and he would have all the starters or alleged starters, and it would really be physical down there. A lot of fun, and you hear the kids talk about it. A lot of great memories, and at that time it would get hot. It would be like 95, 90, like we wouldn't even think to practice, let alone 3 a days. So the kids really learned perseverance down there as well.
It was a lot of good team bonding and team building at that point as well too.
I think that was more than anything. The repetitions, and the kids didn't know. A lot of those Indiana schools were smaller schools than ours, but they were good. But it was exactly what you said, and it built confidence. It really did. It built confidence, and that was huge going into the season. We would, at that time, kids getting on a bus going to Indiana, you might as well thought they were going to Oregon, for God's sake. We were on there forever, and it was cool. Like
it's a long ride.
Yeah,
it's a good 10-hour, 12-hour ride on a bus, no doubt about that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And Jantz would schedule in a stop to Notre Dame, Ohio State. Really great memories. One year the air condition broke. It was like a sweat box, and we're like, we use that at the worst times. Like, you guys were already on a bus. This is nothing. So it was great memories, great times.
Great teams in 2001, 2002, 2009, and during that time period as well too. The years that you didn't win the sectionals, it always seemed it was Orchard Park was your nemesis. Talk about the 2000s and those teams during that time period.
Oh wow, it's there's so much to talk about, and to be honest, a lot of it ran together. I try to think back, and I was asked recently about the best TNT game, like, and some of the best players you coach. I mean, we've coached so many great kids. The 2000s, it's interesting. As a defensive coach, you're a little bit more pessimistic. You're like, oh, we can't stop this team. And Coach Jantzi be like, he'd be the optimist. He's like, we got it made. And I'd just be like, and year to year, we would see a team that on paper were like, one year Will North had, including the Gronkowskis, had like 8 Division I athletes on their team. And we only beat them like 48-10. Like, I mean, it was just like the cohesiveness, the camaraderie. It was really special. So, and like you said, the Orchard Park game would always come down to the end, and it would just be a tough play. And those Orchard Park teams, they were loaded. And some years we'd be more talented, and whatever. Sometimes we'd get an upset, back and forth. But it was just a special time for sure. And like I articulated earlier, it was more, it's year round. And like 7th grade, like those kids were in 7th grade. They're in the weight room. They knew what they were getting into. They knew Orchard Park was going to be a big game, and it usually was. So just a great time.
Adam Dagler, I had him on not too long ago, and he talked about the 2002 team, wishing that they could somehow strap it on against the 2009 team. If that was the case, who'd win?
All right, Dagler. I love it. Oh, man. Really? Oh, God. It depends who was refereeing the game. The 2002 team would, they would stretch the rules a lot more. That's for sure. But who would win that game? That's a great question. There was a lot of talent on that 2009 team. A lot. Those guys would kill me. The 2002 team was bigger, probably a little tougher, not as athletic, probably. So I can't answer that. Come on. Let's go play. Strap them up. Let's see who's in shape.
Well, yeah. Well, in theory, that sounds good. We're well past the years gone by. Want to talk
No
to you
doubt.
about, we're coming up on the 13th year anniversary of the state title game. I want to go to the preseason and your quarterback at the time, Mike Tuzo, proclaiming that NT was going to win the state title. What was the reaction of the coaches when that came out?
What are you, nuts? he I don't know, the expectation, and I think this is really important. um Coaching in other places and just watching programs, when you get ahead of yourself, that's when bad things happen, right? And so, like, the we didn't think of it like that in 2009. I really didn't think at that time state title was just so foreign. We were double A. Some of those teams we would watch, the MSG network. We saw New Rochelle early in the season. Like, it wasn't. It was just, maybe Mike just said it. I'm glad he said it. That was his goal. And it sounds so cliche, but it's true. We really worried one game at a time. Um, and that kind of caught up to us in some of the seasons that we didn't do as well. And we had so much work to do just getting that team ready, 1 week at a time. And every game would present its own little battle. So, the state title game, that season, I should say, it was just, once we got into it, it was an incredible experience because, Adam Dagler has a great point. Like, why couldn't their team do it? Or, even some of the other teams, 2004, like a break here or there, why couldn't they do it? The years we lost Orchard Park, they would make deep runs into the state. So we knew if we could win Buffalo, that was one thing. So I think I think we really we put the hammer on Orchard Park at home that year. Really hammered them. The score was closer than it indicated, but we really got after them. And then Lancaster, they drove the first, and then it was a blowout, and then it was like, and things kind of fell into line. Um, and so it was just a special dream. And so many things have to go right in a season. Like, I mean, even injuries, like poor Aaron Davis didn't even play. He was arguably one of our best players that season. And we had other kids step in. And, like, who is that kind of talent in high school football? Or the right talent? We just had kids that were ready to play. And it was just a really special thing. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think, like, 2009 to me, and I think the alumni really believe it. It really started in 95, when there was no belief, when there was nothing, where they started ground zero, or even early 2000s maybe, when Jantzi lost the first TNT game. People wanted to fire everybody. That was the end of the world. So through that's how you get good, is through adversity. And so it was just, and coaches making mistakes too. Like, some of our other teams, I don't know, kids probably said, oh, Coach Tomm, one game against Lancaster, we fumbled, 3 times in the fourth quarter. Like, that could have been our year. Like, so things just have to go in order, and it's just a special year. And it was, I don't know, it was meant to be, I guess. But Mike too, yeah, we tried to shut that down for sure. And we had a couple cocky kids that would like to say we're going to be state champs, but we did our best to keep them grounded for sure.
You finish up at the stadium, and then you take on Baldwinsville out of Section 3, and you dismantle them pretty well. Then go to another nemesis, Webster Schroeder, and you beat them in Rochester on a soccer field, that soccer stadium, 26-24.
Yep.
And then you're heading to the Dome. What's the feeling of the team saying, we're going to go to the Dome in Syracuse?
Amazing. We just try to, any big game, I don't know if the kids remember this or not, but I would tell myself the same thing: just breathe, smell, like, the smell of football, the smell of fall, smell the foliage, listen to people screaming, look around. I could still visualize walking into the dome, just walking in before the game. I remember specifically in my memory, you probably suffer this sometimes. Our memories are going a little bit, Ed, but I remember for sure practicing on Thanksgiving. We had a practice on Thanksgiving, which is just like so cool. Like, there was like light snow on the ground, and it was an easy practice, but still, like, wow. So the run up was just surreal. I always, I always give Coach Jantzi a hard time because the offensive coaches, they just, okay, this is what defense they're going to run, and that's it. And we would be digging through the defensive film, running. We had their whole season in our computer system, and that's a lot of work on a short week there. So a lot of that was scrambling around, but it's just, yeah, you really can't describe it. You just try to capture it and enjoy it and remember the kids. And it was a lot of fun.
How confident were you going into that game?
Confident? To be confident would be, I think, well, I was confident that our kids would play hard, right? And again, that's so cliche, but like New Rochelle is 3 or 4 times the size of our school. Um, we saw New Rochelle play against Greg Paulus from CBA Syracuse a couple years prior when they had Rice. And I remember going to the state championship game. Matter of fact, we just lost our dear friend Ed Argast, who was a coach at Canisius College. And he taught us, like, come up and watch the state title games and see what you see. And I remember sitting there like, these teams are ridiculous. So New Rochelle, I knew our guys were going to just give everything, true NT, blue collar, give it all. And so I guess I was confident that we made it. Are we going to win this game? Coach Jantzi, I don't know what he would say. He'd probably say, yeah, I knew we were going to win, but I was just scared. Can we stop these guys? Can we match up physically? And as the game played out and we were leading by halftime, it was just like, wow, we are here and let's go, let's finish. And of course, I remember at halftime, coach was like, okay, boys, all we have to do is not let them score again. And I'm like, what? But we had great confidence in our guys. I mean, to be honest with you, and again, I hate it. It's the truth. We just want our guys to play hard. Just play hard, play for each other, have a blast, and let the chips fall where they may. And that's what they did. And there were so many guys, Ed, that when you go back to the film and just see some of the plays that were made away from the ball, interior, or just spectacular tackles, like, running kids down on angles or pursuit or just create, big blocks. It was just a lot of fun to watch. It was just beautiful.
What were your thoughts when Derek Bloomfield made that catch, that halfback option pass catch in the end zone and skied for the ball?
My first thought was, we got to stop. we got to stop. Derek was unbelievable athlete, unbelievable play. To New Rochelle's credit, I mean, they had it covered. They're not dummies over there. They had us scouted. They knew that it was in our playbook. And it was just like a huge, like, wow. So that's all I remember. But seriously, I was thinking it's kind of like watching our Buffalo Bills this year. I'm not comfortable until there's zeros on the clock. I was just like, oh my gosh, can we stop them? And luckily they did not have a huge passing game, which always scares the heck out of me at that time. And their starting quarterback did go out. But anything can happen. And so many kids played great that game. If you go back,
for that championship game, did you come up with a specific game plan, or were you using the same plays and just looking for the better execution on those plays?
Yeah. I'm not like a guru. So we got beat in Jamestown 48-8. One of our first years coaching, Coach Deach was the defensive coordinator. And we were in the infancy of where we got to. And we were sitting on the sideline and we did not have an answer. And you remember those Jamestown teams was just power eye, off tackle. And, we just, we're outmanned. Are we out prepared? I don't know, but it was such a tough feeling as a coach. Like, what do you do? Like, we had nothing. So as we evolved as a defense, I like to have, we were able, because we took the chance in two platoon, which was novel at that time. Lancaster is doing it today. I don't know how close you're able to follow Western New York. I know you're in Syracuse. Lancaster has like 60 guys on their football team right now. And the reason they have 60 guys, and we had 60 guys back then, is that kids were going to play. So once we made the commitment to, okay, you're a defensive player, you're an offensive player, we'd have tweeners, a couple guys that could go both ways with different packages. We were able to have an odd man front and an even man front defense, and the kids were comfortable either way. And we had this goal line package commando that that came up big in that game. So to answer your question, we always input the data on what could beat us. So we took their top 10 formations. What are the plays that they want to run that we have to take away? What are their favorite passing patterns? Let's be sound versus these. We had our own, we blitzed a lot in those days, and a lot of them were in passing, so we were comfortable playing man behind it. We were very aggressive defense out of multiple looks. So I remember Mr. Yeager was a math teacher up the hall, and he's like, I was wondering when you're going to get out of that defense. But we were lucky because of what we built over the years, in that I can't remember. I think we started out in a 3-3 stack, got out of it into the 4, and we were better there. So to answer your question, I'm sorry, in a long way, is we were worried more about us and how we can align to you. And if we are, if you're getting some momentum in this defense, then we got to switch it up, which is easy for the kids. We could line up in one and without even personnel changes. And actually that happened to Lancaster that year in the sectional title. They were gashing us, and we just took a timeout. I'm like, okay, boom. All right, we got to go to this package. And the kids are comfortable. I mean, it's high school football. So if you start scheming up, and we made that mistake over the years too, where like, oh, we got to change our defense this week. And then what do you do? You're teaching the kids to think, right? And we don't want the kids thinking, we want them just playing. So they were confident behind it, and it's a great feeling once the kids can, they call out the checks of what we wanted. So that's kind of how we went into that game.
In your description of that, was that on a week-to-week basis where you got into all the tendencies and charted everything with the opposition and what their tendencies were offensively and defensively?
Yes, we were ahead of the game, and we being Coach Jantzi. And I don't know if any of the other kids called him Poindexter on your interview show yet.
No, not yet, but I'm sure they will now.
Poindexter, the kids used to call him Poindexter because he had computers before computers were invented. And, we just tease him because he was like a mad scientist, and he had, to be honest, Ed, we had quite the advantage because we were willing to work hard. And Coach Vetter worked hard, Clint Smallback, those guys worked hard. You heard that they would run that film back and forth over and over again. And we had videotapes. But in those days, high school teams didn't trade films. So we would go out, put our scout teams out, tape we had every game. Then we'd go put it in a thing called a Palm Pilot. I don't even know if they're still around, and put them in there. And we would have a spreadsheet on every formation. If they ran to strength, weak, what are they going to run in this formation? What's their tendency on 1st and 10? What's their tendency on 3rd? So I always feel you got to win 1st and 10. So we would work on 1st and 10 and short yardage, and then 3rd down plays. So every week, yeah, that's what we would break it down. We were definitely over the top. I would say OCD is a word. Anybody that knows me or seen any of our football preparation, a little bit over the top. For defensive coaches, like if you meet a good defensive coordinator, chances are they're a little bit, a little bit crazy, paranoid. You want to be prepared for everything. And when you get embarrassed, like I said, that game in Jamestown, you never want to be embarrassed again. And so we wanted the kids prepared, and we put a lot of time into it. And the coaches, like I said, I credit Jantzi for doing that. And we go to clinics and ask other coaches, like, how do you prepare for this? And visit college coaches and say, okay, what does your practice week look like? And we took that information and put it together, and kind of the equalizer today. And we're Coach Bunkers, and we even learned toward the end. You've heard of huddle, obviously, but all the coaches now, they have the film, and they have people that will break it down for you. So it's a little easier. So like in those days, we felt like we had to make up. We played Lockport had a kid. Darren Stone played for the Atlanta Falcons. James Starks played in for the Green Bay Packers. Like we felt we had to overcome that somehow, and that was what we did to give the kids a chance to defeat these kids, and it helped. Now with Huddle, they just trade films, and everybody's got that information, and it's up to you to do it. In those days, the 2000s, like you were talking about, we were at every game. We did it. Teams would want to trade, we'd say no, we don't need any film, and it was a great advantage for us at that time period.
When you went to coaching clinics and you explained what you guys were doing, did some of these other coaches think you were nuts?
Yeah, well, and this goes back to Coach Anastasi, and even our other staffs. They thought we were nuts because we just have so much fun on these clinics, to be honest with you. But it was like kind of it's a bonding experience with your staff. So we'd go and have the greatest time, just being gone for the weekend. But when you go to a coaching clinic, you find out you're normal, because all these guys. I always said that I was blessed because coaching allowed me to teach. And it drives my wife crazy. She's a kindergarten teacher and is always cutting out things and prepping her classroom and things like that. And the classroom became a lot easier when you had these kids after school who were thriving to be great. You have to chase them around. And when you go to a coaching clinic, you're around a lot of like-minded people, and you would you would go see college coaches, and there would be some high school coaches, and then of course you would meet guys. Some they'd be your enemies during the season, and then you find out, wow, that's a really cool guy. And then you talk about things like, what did you see in this game, or when you played this team? And it just made us better. Like I would go down to Florida and stop at West Virginia to watch their spring practice. Duke, Florida, Navy, and UB all the time. UB's been so great to us, letting us come and watch their practices. I remember the defensive coordinator, Jimmy Knowles, was the head coach at Cornell. And so a lot of simple things like Jimmy Knowles, when he was at Cornell, he would have a college football take a right knee. He didn't say take a knee. He said take a right knee. And some people are like, oh, you're nuts. But that's the discipline you need. So when our kids at NT, they took a knee, it would be the right knee. Silly things like that. But just football is just a really fun sport, and you can get really carried away with it. And you always wanted to get better and get better. And that's what we tried to do. And that's what we're able to do. And then, the kids get better. So you're always on the cutting edge.
2019, clock runs down to 0. You end up winning. What's the feeling that's going through your mind at that point on the field, and the celebration, and then on the field, and on the bus ride home, and then the police escort into the high school by North Tonawanda's finest?
Yeah, 2009. Did you mean that? I think you said 19. That's okay.
2009.
Oh man, I was exhausted, to be honest with you. It's just like that was one emotional week. You're just grinding, and the season. Think about that. That's 13 weeks plus, 15 weeks. Your body is really not cut out for that. The kids, battled injuries and all the way through, and it was you just think of the people that paved the way for us, and think of it's just cool. And it sounds kind of like my father was a great influence, and like I mentioned, all the coaches, and then the players that didn't have that opportunity to go there, and the great kids, and then some of the guys that are no longer with us that didn't have the opportunity that we did. So it was really emotional and draining and exciting. It was just great, and it's always going to be a good memory. But there was always good memories after that too. I have to be honest with you.
I want to veer off to the side. I want to talk about the TNT experiences.
Okay.
Playing a bigger school against a small school, an old Niagara Frontier League school where back then in the day, in the 50s and 60s, it didn't matter what size your school was. It was a very, very competitive football league. What do you recall from those TNT games and those experiences?
Well, like we alluded to at the beginning of the interview, I grew up in Batavia, but I remember, coming back. It was like big time football. Like I'd be a kid and I would go to a TNT game, and I remember Tonawanda had, they had Kenny Hire, and I remembered him because he was a left-handed quarterback, and then NT with they had the streaker game. I was just a kid when the guy went streaking across the field.
1977, where he didn't get caught, or 1979, where he was arrested?
I didn't know that. Is that true?
That is true.
Oh, well, I was 10 for 77. I thought he got away. I didn't know.
The
Was it the same guy?
77, he got away. We're trying to get the whole conspiracy group together for a 45th anniversary talk. They call it Silver Streak 77.
Is it the same guy or no?
No. And then the guy in 79, he didn't have quite the elaborate plan, or they were waiting for him, and he was caught. He was arrested. He had to do a lot of community service, and he was not allowed to do any things at the high school, any extracurricular things at the high school until he graduated.
Wow, I did not know. Thank you for that information. But
You're
this is
very
what
welcome.
I love about TNT. There are so many stories and traditions, and it was edgy. Like I remember, it was intense. I was just telling Art Pappas my first. So I knew TNT, and I knew the excitement. I heard the stories about the train tracks, and so I did a JV football game. I was coaching JV at the time, and I think we lost or tied. Um, and I knew we were in trouble in the first half because the whole crowd was packed with Tonawanda. They were packed, and I was like, in JV games, 10 o'clock in the morning, you get a handful of parents, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is big, and I don't know if our guy dropped the 2-point conversion, something like we should have won, but we lost, and they were just so excited, and I was so mad. I was like, man, that will never happen again. And I remember the feeling with Coach Jantzi's first loss, and there was so much anger, and it was a tough way to lose, and people were ticked, and we're like, we are not losing to Tonawanda again. So I remember, it's just fun. First off, it was just tremendously fun for the schools, for the community. And I did a lot of research on TNT back in the day, and there were times where NT would be getting the best of them, and they talked about the school size discrepancy and things of that nature. And there were some scores that got out of hand, like you said, in the mid 2000s, where we were really good. Actually, I just looked this up. 2004, I believe it's 2004. I might be wrong. They were number one in the polls in small schools. We were number one in large schools. So that was like, right there. Those are two big games, and it was like a decent game. And then the 2000, I believe it was the mud storm. Was it 2006? Tonawanda missed an extra point on a muddy field. We didn't practice all week because school was closed, and I was shocked that we played the game. And they ran that tight wing stuff, and it's just a mud fest. So we had some wars with them. One game I remember, the opening kickoff, there was a fight right on the 50-yard line. The ambulance was. I mean, it's just always one year there was like egg tossing, like first years, it was like always just crazy things going on. But what was cool with that, and I think it's great, it went between the lines, it was fierce, it was physical. Some years we'd have a little rivalry with the coaches, or at least they thought we had a rivalry with them. The chain gang at Tonawanda, did they ever tell you about that?
No.
Oh, when we first started coaching at Tonawanda, and I don't know if those guys are still there. They're great guys now, but when we first started, if we were in their way, they would come. They would put those stakes right next to your foot and like yell at you to like get out of the way. They were like almost. They thought they were in the game. I mean, it was intense. Years as years played out, we joke around with them and things like that, and we kind of got their respect. But man, they thought they were in the battle zone. So TNT, I mean, it's a really cool thing for the communities. I just the size of the school, obviously, it was tough on us when Tonawanda was good or competitive. That's what do we have to win? Like, and it would be like on. So we've been in some real brawls where we were lucky to win those games, and so I always said, like, you do not want you want to get on them quickly, because once you let them get confidence, then you're going to be in for a dogfight. But they always played really hard, and it's so cool, a great tradition.
Should the TNT tradition continue?
Oh, I think so. Is it easy for me to say as a North Tonawanda? There was there was a time. I mean, some of the scores started getting ridiculous. Like we won 68-0, and we didn't mean to. Like we were running fullback dive, and kids would break it for touchdowns. So there's a couple tough years there. There was a couple years when we had good teams, and I'm like, it was almost like you played Tonawanda, you got this momentum going to the playoffs, and then it's a fun game, but as a coach, you wanted to be peaking, and then it's kind of I got into that a couple of years, but now that I'm take the step back and you're not in the grind and you're not everything was about hey, we got to get better this week and da da da. Some it goofs up the Section 6 schedule. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Section 6 is not they're not happy with it, but I think it's just great for the communities, and obviously a couple of years they finally got one after 20 years, so that'll give them hope for the next 20 years or so. But no, I think it's just so cool, and the spirit the kids. I mean, everybody in the school for that week can be part of the school community, and I know Tonawanda does a great job with that as well. Mr. Oldenburg, the superintendent's an NT guy, and I know he wants his program to be built up, the way we had it at North Tonawanda. So I hope they keep it going. I don't. I just think it's more than football, right? It's community tradition, rivalry. I mean, it's families. It's a lot. So I hope they never get rid of
You became an NT head coach twice.
Yeah.
Got to ask you this: what was it harder to be the head coach or as an assistant coach during your coaching career?
No doubt. And I never, I never had aspirations to be a head coach. Some of my dearest friends know that. My family knows that. So, and it kind of takes a special personality to be a head coach, and a different mindset, and you have to let things roll off your back. Sometimes they drive us crazy with Coach Jantzi. Nothing would bother him on the outside. Everything would look fine, but he'd be burning up on the inside over certain things, but you never knew it. So he was a prototypical head coach, great leader, never get, rattled or discouraged. I think that's the big thing in education, especially with athletics or with any extracurricular program. There's a vision for excellence, and when you feel like you don't have that support, it's easy to get discouraged. And Coach Jantzi never wavered from that. We've had some years where we didn't have teacher contracts, so we would get pressure, from the teachers union, like, hey, knock it off. And we supported the teachers, like, yeah, like we should be we put all these hours in. So, but through all that, it's about the kids, right? And Coach Jantzi was great at that. So the first time I became head coach, Coach Jantzi moved out of town to the worst place in the state, Orchard Park. And so we just had, of all places, I used to tease him about that. And we were really set up. Um, the big thing that Coach Bunker's finding now, and it's a reality all across the state, is finding coaches at all levels. And with that, when he left, we had the infrastructure. I think at that time we might have had 3 college coaches on our staff. Dave Celeste from Ithaca, Frank Fusco was a Division I coach at Fordham. Coach Zayas has been there forever. Coach Cook, we just had a great Coach O'Brien. We had a bunch of assistant coaches that could easily be head coaches. So I don't know. I don't know if I was just the oldest guy or I was just the next guy to kind of take it. And I took it for a couple of years, and we really enjoyed it. And then my family was real young at that time, and we didn't feel like we were getting the support. And as life played out, it was I felt bad about how things happened. And then the second time, it was kind of the same thing. It was kind of the same thing. I had to be honest with you. I would be perfectly happy to be an assistant coach. I never. What I noticed being a head coach, you get a lot more mail, a lot more email, and things of that nature. All of a sudden, people think you're important. I used to teach Coach Jantzi about that, and which is fine. So it was never what I really wanted. But there was a couple times where I just wrong place at the wrong time or right place at the right time, whichever way you want to look at it. And I took it for a couple years and enjoyed the heck out of it. And I was lucky. It's always about you're only as good as your coaches, right, on staff. Like I said, right out of the gate, your modified coaches, your freshman coaches, your kicking or whatever role you have, you're only as good as that guy. Because if that coach is not sending the same message to the kids are going to find that, and they will look at that as a weakness. So yeah, both timings weren't great for me. Being a head coach, like I said, I was more like I looked at it as kind of taking one for the team or trying to step up and make it right. And it was a great experience. You can't live life with regrets, but I always felt most comfortable being the assistant.
You talk about that you probably got more attention as a head coach. Some of that attention probably came from parents. And talk about how the overzealousness of parents, or maybe I'll use the phrase interference, or their unwanted input could affect the program.
I'll be honest, and this is crazy. And I even said this as a teacher. One great thing about North Tonawanda is, and believe me, it hasn't been all perfect, but like for the most part, our parents have been very supportive of us, even in the classroom. Like there are school districts where you can't give a kid an 89 without a phone call and being called the worst teacher in the world. And or if a kid gets out of line, call home, and then they complain about the teachers. Most of the time, our parents at NT have been great. Another great thing about Coach Jantzi, he doesn't talk a lot. So if he ever had conversations from parents, it probably didn't go very far. But of course we had success too, Ed, right? So like
right.
When you're successful, and we played kids, like in football, we played a lot of kids. So we would tell the kids, like, part of growing up is being a man. And part of being a man is if you're unhappy with your playing time or unhappy with this, you come talk to the coaches and you handle it. And we have plenty of drills during the week of practice where we'll make it personal. Like, okay, Ed, you're better than Rick Tomm. You call him into this drill and let's see what you got. So football was it's very cut and dry in that regard. And as the head coach, I got a couple silly emails, and we would just quickly inform them, like, we just love I would tell the parents, Ed, and this Thomas guy, we had meet the parents night. And part of our speech was, we want your son to be the best possible man possible. the best person he can be. We want him not to use drugs, not to drink, not to be a jerk, to get great grades in school, to be respectful to people. Okay, that's what we want. Now, if you want that and you support us, that's going to make it happen. But if you're behind our back telling what idiots we are, then that kind of ruins the message. And I understand it 50-50. Parents aren't going to like you. The 50% that like you is their kids playing. So when I see my children play a sport or my nephews, I want to see them play. And if they're not in the game, then the coach stinks, right? So,
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how I take it. So from my experience at North Tonawanda, we've had excellent support. We've very few situations like you read about. We've had really good people behind our back. Maybe not so much, but who cares? Like everybody's going to complain. Now, where I'm getting upset as a parent is all these travel sports are out of control, and it's really a shame because out where I live, we don't even have a local baseball league when my son was growing up because these parents want to travel everywhere and be on the best team. And it's not just about, playing a sport and having fun with your friends. And everything's about, oh, we got to play hockey, but we can't play hockey in town. We got to go to Canada or Detroit or Pittsburgh. And my daughter just started volleyball, and it's the same thing. We went to Michigan, and there's thousands of people just spending all kinds of crazy money. So that's a little discouraging. The good old days are definitely over as far as just go in the backyard, play ball. We joined a team. Oh, the best guys get on this travel team. That's it. Now we have 75 travel teams from one town. So that's where I think parents have kind of overstepped a little bit, thinking that you can just sign your kid up for anywhere and they're going to be a Division I athlete.
You've been an
And that's it.
assistant.
That was one other good thing with football. Ed, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
In
ahead.
football, you can't have travel football, can you?
No.
Or, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
7-on-7, big deal. That's not football. It's glorified, touch. So that was another great thing with football. We didn't have all these guru, some of my buddies that coach basketball. Well, they're coached by all these shot doctors and, dribble gurus, and awesome. Your kid's not very good. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
At the end of the seasons, all these years that you've coached, you've had some kids that went on to Division III, maybe a few Division I along the way, and a lot of them, it's the end of the road. What goes through a coach's mind like yours when it's the end of the season and it's their end of their football careers?
Next play, Ed. Like, what are you gonna do now? And like I said, my best satisfaction. I'm happy. I'm trying not to mention some of these guys bring a tear to my eye. My electrician comes out here. That's one of the best players that ever played football in North Tonawanda. Who fixes my furnace, and we just laugh and tell old stories and catch up where some of these guys are, and guys that come in from out of town, or even just like this guy this morning. That's what it's all about. And you always want, okay, who wants to play college football? And they're all like, yeah, okay, let's see what's out there. And when some of the guys have gone off, their best memories are still high school football. So I would catch a lot. I try to watch some of our kids play college football and support them in that way. And the last game, you kind of prepare them for that. I think that's kind of what we prepared them for. Is like, the greatest thing about football prepares you for life. I mean, we said pride, breaking our defensive huddle, or pride. We wouldn't just throw it around. Pride means pursuit, perseverance, respect, intelligence, desire, discipline, and enthusiasm. And you take those adjectives, apply them to whatever career, being a dad, being a husband. If you do those things, you're going to be successful. And that's what it's all about. So the last football games, it was sad because, it's team 127, or I think we're up to 129 now. I've kind of lost track. And then it's next chapter, so next play. But it's been a great run.
We've talked about several different things here so far. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
I think you covered everything, Ed. You're awesome. Um, I think we really did cover everything. I really wanted to make sure I mentioned a lot of the great people that I coached with and mentors. And I was just, I'm just really blessed and grateful. And the kids that we met and kids that have come around. And, I think we covered them all. And if I started naming names, I'm going to leave one of them out. And I think
That's the
most of the
risk.
guys.
That's the risk that happens when you start naming. Invariably, you're going to leave somebody out, and intentionally or unintentionally.
I love these guys. I love watching them on the TV, and I think back to like some of the things I yelled at those guys. And man, I went up to one guy. I saw him at the gas station last. I think it was last spring. Doesn't really matter. And he's a local politician. He's doing great, great kid. And his dad was a good ball player, and this kid was a great hockey player. And I would be like all over him at. And so as you get older, I'd be like, oh man, did I make that kid not? And I just ran into him out of nowhere. And I said, you know what? I said, did I, I apologize. He goes, no, coach, that was great. And and I think he was sincere, but like for years, he just like, you're not perfect, right? You just want the best for the kids. And sometimes you're a little bit too animated or too aggressive. And then obviously before I had children, you were a little less sensitive than maybe now that I have children. And the kids would tease me about that too. Once I started having kids, they would say I got soft, and I probably did. But you had to. We evolved. Like if you look at society and you hear some of the greatest coaches, they were just talking about Lindy Ruff. I was hearing a podcast the other day about Lindy Ruff for the Devils, and they said he was terrible to play for the Sabres when they were great because he was just like all the time. And now he's got these younger kids in New Jersey playing great, but he had to evolve. You can't teach and coach old school, So
There's going to be a
that's one
time.
thing.
There's going to be a day when you're not going to coach anymore, either volunteering or not. What's it going to be like when you take that whistle off for the last time?
Well, I don't know if it is the last time yet. Right now I'm at a standstill. There's been very few times that I haven't coached, and I think my children get tired of it because it doesn't come off, and so sometimes I'm coaching them. And I guess that's kind of what we did with our kids too. Was just coaching life and just trying to live and make the best version of ourselves and themselves. And somebody asked me, "Are you going to coach again?" And I don't know if the opportunity presents itself. And my children get a little older. Right now, we're running everywhere, so it's just a really cool time in our lives. And then if I have the energy, and if I know what I'm doing, someone gives me the opportunity, it'll be great. But right now, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing.
There's been a lot of assistant coaches and head coaches in North Tonawanda history that have gone down in history. How would you like to be remembered by?
Man, it's just a guy that did his best, worked his hardest for just to try to help boys become men and good people, using a sense of humor, and just did the best he can. Often wasn't perfect, but he had a big heart and he cared, and hopefully someone appreciates that down the road.
Rick Tomm, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate your time. We've probably set a record for the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. You are video number 863, and we continue to motor on with this. I want to thank you so much for joining me here tonight. It's been a lot of fun. I wish you well, you and your family well. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. It's been great, and thanks for keeping that history alive.